colleagues, we shall proceed with our technical session. Our speaker is busy at another session. Oleg Glebov will speak about biometric technologies, use of biometrics in the interests of cybersecurity. Just a minute, please. Okay, let us welcome Oleg. Oleg, please. Good afternoon, all. I'm Oleg Glebov. I work in the world of cybersecurity about 10 years. I work on information security protection of major entities. I worked with the international business. I now work with the CRT, responsible for biometric technologies, identification of voice and stream data. So if I have to think about bridge with previous presentations, yes, on the one hand, you can say that investments in Russian companies may pose questions, but on the other hand, it'll be strange to say that there is no way to collaborate and to invest. So probably it all depends upon the stuff that you have in your head. So there are certain things which are absolutely political. Take Asian region or Arab countries and other places where people are interested purely in good technologies, nothing but good technologies. So, well, I'll speak about things that I came across in my personal business. So, biometric technologies turned out to be of interest to many. And specifically now, when we all talk about cyber security, it is very important to protect not just business data, but also to improve the level of interaction of human beings with IT technologies. 2019 is the year of serious changes in the world. And in the world of investments also. And all of that is because of fastly growing level of threats, and many companies migrate to artificial intelligence. And just to explain why investments in this area are of interest. Everything is very simple. There's a shortage of professionals, and this is why automation could help, machine training, use of various service models can be very helpful, and development of IT technologies in general. There's demand, there's a market, there are technologies available. This is why the growth. And the market is of interest for investors, of course, if you think about finance distribution. So specifically things like IT development of blockchain. why biometrics is important in terms of cybersecurity. Raise your hands, all those who talked something to your smartphone, to Siri, or say, okay, good. Who of you have a smart column down at home? If you look at the number of producers of ecosystems, systems that interact with human beings, well, the existing interest in the market can be explained easily. All that is very profitable. And now many users simply don't understand what non-cloud service is, whether it's possible to interact with the system without supporting services. So, well, the younger people do not want to become programmers because they think everything can be done automatically. Of course, we as a company should perfectly understand what our place will be in the new world of voice recognition. Voice recognition technology is important to prevent fraud in banking, for instance. Such technologies do exist now. Various systems with face identification. Well, there's nothing new. Or maybe you heard that in Moscow underground, they plan to install new hardware for face identification, and this may start working pretty soon. Many corporate users in one way or another came across interesting situations. Some say, I don't like to use tokens or cards or anything to enter the office. I think my face or my voice or fingerprint is enough for identification. And, actually, this is what is actually happening. What is next? Smart cities, industrial cybersecurity, biometrics to enterprise. So the technologies are subject to significant changes. So biometric technologies were on the rise of plateau. Now we'll see a massive implementation of biometrics-based solutions. And another thing, any specialists on cybersecurity deal with enormous databases and data arrays. In augmented reality, they can work.
Speech recognition can be included, and that's communicating with the systems as applied to voice. I work in sophisticated cyber threat security, and I discuss with my partners. They willy-nilly introduce natural language processing. That is, a cybersecurity professional should know what the database is, what to filter. He just tells you, please show me all the events for a certain time period on certain devices, and the system will construe his written text using filters and showing him the required information. The next steps: why to write that up? He just says, please show it to me, filter it, apply it to the working station, upgrade it. It seems rather sophisticated or exotic or inapplicable. But there are 3D models on the stand, like virtual socks, smart socks. Willy-nilly they will come up to that because there is a shortage of professionals. We should help them communicate with the systems faster, as better applied for his needs, without using extra motions with the mouse or the keyboard. Clearly, the last thing I'd like to mention. We'll see it in the most near future. In IT systems, subsystems, the so-called conversational UI. It's a technology of communicating with any system, not only regard to cybersecurity, but in the conversational windows. That is man-to-machine dialogue in a language clear to a human, but not as it had been programmed for a certain needs. So we are working on all of it at our company, and we apply various technologies. I can bring up some examples and how it relates to cybersecurity. Clearly, when we discuss investment, yes, biometrics relates willy-nilly to cybersecurity. Whether the biometrics market is growing, yes, in strides. Biometrics is being implemented almost ubiquitously in all technologies. Yeah, some old class technologies are still being used. The regions lag behind. But biometrics is coming everywhere. It's our future of the IT technologies available presently. The projections on the markets are rather interesting. Certainly, the investments are attractive there. Whether biometrics can be unsafe, can be in isolation from cybersecurity? No, probably, because biometrics needs other approaches to cybersecurity, other views of how perpetrators can get access to the system, how to protect the biometric data inside a company. I'll tell you later how various countries try to regulate this issue, but it's an interesting trend anyway. Clearly, of the latest trends I'd like to share with you, there are two clear-cut segments. There's a B2C market. All of us who use antiviruses at home or other protective means, VPN, or for instance, the manager passport. There are enterprises that protect their employees and customers. I like these statistics that tells us that voice per se is becoming a new source identification in a new context in info security. While 70% of the enterprises will transfer their management to voice-based ID and face-based ID, certainly cybersecurity should evaluate that in this regard. The same relates to consumer business. Interestingly, up to the mid 2020, all the queries in the internet will not be made using a keyboard. Either it will be done automatically or by voice. More than 30% of these queries come from the devices having no displays. It's a huge market, which is now in embryo, and it will be a chunky piece for the companies in cybersecurity. All of it should be protected. These are absolutely new niches, which overall are not in the focus of the majority of the companies, also internationally. Why biometric identification is so attractive? As I said earlier, if you have something that can be kept in mind or can be bring in, the tokens, certificates, smart cards, mobile telephone, just keep in mind your password, your mother's name. All of it is very unstable. You can lose it any time. Evildoers can learn about it any time. I just talked to a Bank of Russia expert here. 90% of those call a call center knowing all the information, passwords, code words, all the information about the customer. If you are not in biometrics, it's very hard to deal with all of that. Thanks God, all of it is being now developed in Russia. Local international banks, they are building in this system into their ID systems. It's very hard to cheat this system, particularly when you use a bimodal ID by voice. It's a new level. It's very hard to counterfeit it, to bypass it, let alone some fingerprints or whatever. Because the world is changing. All the devices currently. Additional reality technologies now probably are on the decline after the first Google Glass explosion, which did not take place. But these technologies will come anyway. It seems presently, everybody knows. There is a fiction film, a particular opinion when he studied memory using visual interfaces. We'll come to that anyway, sooner or later. Technologies are capable to do that. You might recall the latest Soccer Cup 2018, which was transmitted to the internet. You can press the button on any soccer player and learn everything about him. We are living in an additional in an enriched data environment. As soon as it reaches your computer, only your face and your voice will be needed. That's it for ID. You come up to a new understanding. What ID of a person is. It's not a password, not anything else. It's not a domain or a password of an employee. It's his face and voice. How to identify it better? How to identify better what he or she says, what language they use, how to recognize his face, how it can work in connection. We see many projects right now being implemented by many companies. I personally is international business. I am international business. There's a question of investment. We have received some queries or requests from major suppliers about ID systems who are in ID management. They approached us and said, we would like to implement it. We do not have such a request in the market, but would like to be the first one who would offer a complete transition from some digital systems to biometrics. It's quite interesting where all of us will end up with. Detecting that's a living human being to counter fraud or replay attacks, person replacement, and so on. There are three key areas of competence. To summarize, where can it apply? Certainly, identification. Some extra ID means a person for access to a certain system. For example, one bank, if a person calls just voice, he can be identified by voice. He gives access only to look up his data, but you cannot make a transaction. A person gets faster access, but he or she has some restrictions on what he or she can do. If he or she is identified by face, he gets access to everything. The simplicity of this approach is, probably like a new area of countering fraud, also in banking. As I said, if you mean employee ID, it's a new area. It's gathering more other data, looking for insiders, some in-house fraud, or probably to verify what an employee has done. It will be at much a higher level. When we say that a person works with the system can identify him or her in clear, he or she will be personally responsible. And the last thing, new interfaces, voice, chatbots. It sounds rather primitively, but it's quite a cool technology of your interface with employees, customers, and such heavy systems that, for example, network with large size databases or data. Well, willy-nilly, I mentioned some consumer business. There is also a user market where protection is required. But in this regard, all of us as users, as humans, we live in a large city. And more countries are working on the safe city concept. Willy-nilly is being implemented elsewhere. Unfortunately, what's taking place, information protection and physical protection, they are in two different domains. On the one hand, it's video monitoring, telecom. And the other thing is protection against virus, an error. In the future, these two worlds will merge. And the non-physical and physical threats will become just a common threat to a safe city. There could be various public services provided based on biometrics or getting access to telemedicine. It's also a huge individual area. Many companies, also internationally, go to telemedicine. It is one of the growing trends, growing in strides. Transport protection, safety, sports stadiums, shopping malls, corporate business protection, all of it is becoming some ecosystem. As applied to Russia, it's law 187, federal law 87, what's more or less critical to the state. So the state regulates all the facilities that are critical for the country. We, on our part, we as a company, we do not work directly in cybersecurity. We have major physical protection projects. When I joined the company, we launched such major projects. How to merge physical and protection cybersecurity. It's not easy. These two domains do not go crisscross oftentimes, do not overlap. But willy-nilly it goes in that direction. If we have an expert in info security, any IT device, any new camera, is a small-size server which is accessible to malefactor, and new risks emerge for penetration. I know one interesting story. End of last year, some internet-available video cameras, they were used to hack fuel stations in Israel, and they diverted that fuel. We should not forget about that. It may the companies who are in infrastructure protection, they will understand so later. They should provide a blanket coverage in security, cybersecurity, physical security, because in isolation from that, you get some interstratum, which is like a gray zone where fraudsters live, and also biometrics protection itself. There is stop agenda now to create a uniform biometrics system. All of us can give data, which is stored in some integrated database. Then you get access to some resource. But how all of it is safe? How well this data is protected? Whether the malefactors can dub you, use your digital clone to get access to your resources. These issues are being debated hectically globally, and it relates to cybersecurity. How these law offenders can use this data, how subject this data is to hacking, to intrusion, or also for the purpose of acts of terror. Another example from our practice. There's another interesting trend, the view of biometric data world and cybersecurity. We have a competence of voice recognition for hospitals. We tested on a pilot basis more than 6 health facilities in Russia. I will expand this area. Well, when you show up at a hospital, a diagnosis set on you, and your doctor will not write up manually some strange things, but there will be 100% digitalized voice recording. You understand, there can be my 5,000 patient cards unprotected, thrown somewhere. But in this case, this technology will work. Well, what about data protection? If someone erases all this data digitally at your polyclinic, you will not like it. And this is also debated by the federal law on critical infrastructure protection. And the health sector is a critical structure of our country, which is also regulated. These technologies, like any other innovations, if there is no protection, data protection, if there is no access control to this data, it will probably offer more risks than benefit. We should work jointly, implementing new technologies and ensure security. In parallel, I like this last hype cycle of advanced technologies relating to artificial intelligence. The Global company produces almost every year. There are fairly many interesting technologies here, which are in embryo. Voice recognition now on the plateau now has leveled off, and it's absolutely mature technology. As I said, natural language recognition, some people will not be able to communicate with IT systems except by voice. The technology advance in this direction. As for investment, it's more than research or some exotic applications at certain companies, but in 2, 3, or 5 years, it will be ubiquitous. Clearly, cybersecurity also will apply these technologies both intrinsically and in the context of cybersecurity. The last thing I'd like to debate is probably a bit remote from biometrics. It seemed to me also interesting. to think over. There were a couple of aspects relating to industrial security. I personally worked for 3 years on industrial security. If you look for the security of a certain critical facility, industrial enterprise, transport infrastructure, whatever, these systems are related to IT anyway. So it's some software that monitors digitally, builds models, detects deviations where fraudsters may step in. If you encountered willy-nilly some presentations of any vendor in Russia or abroad, there always is some detail. We protect everything except the highest level. We do not work with the physical world. A law offender breaks into the system, but how can you see operationally how a metro escalator works if it's not connected to an IT system? There may be some sensors, yes, but it's a higher level. One of the areas which is being promoted now is voice data recognition, sound data recognition in most varied industries, like car manufacture, industrial enterprises, transport, railways. Also get information from the physical world in sounds, and then we construe what happens. They're very jokes. You may take any industry, industrial enterprise, whatever happens there, an old man of 75 years old comes and says, it will break down in a week. And it does work. It's one of the areas our company works in, and we see a very wide perspective for that. It's predictive maintenance, as it's called in the West.
Predictive maintenance to prevent damage of the equipment, to avoid hardware shutdown. And we use sound patterns which make possible to detect deviations from a regular mode of operation. For instance, if something goes wrong with your elevator, it'll be possible for us to detect it in good time. And this is very important. And this is a good example of the situations when virtual and material world can collaborate. Or, for instance, take electricity generation. Electricity is important for material world, and in order to detect any problems, you need very specific things now. But migration to sound patterns will change the situation. This is technology of the future. And such technology is already available in Russia. It means that investments are needed and very important, and cybersecurity depends upon many things. Privacy, for instance, in Korea, it is prohibited to collect personal data in any way other than specified. Legal regulations in France 2 months ago. 2 months ago, while one developer does its best to prove that they meant no harm when they started introducing biometric technology. In the United States, there's a clear association. It's a consortium of airports and stadiums. The entities that collect personal data of all those who go through airports and stadiums. So now we're witnessing a growing market of personal data, and the situation is quite specific. It is hard to say that it is absolutely the same in all countries. Of course, it's not, but still, in my opinion, standards sooner or later will be changed, and all that will be closely related to the problem of cyber security, so that even though you use the biometrics, nobody will be able to make your cyber twin. So if you're interested, please visit our